He handed me the papers on our 40th anniversary. He told me I was being replaced like an old appliance. He asked which color I would like, a new one painted. This recipe box has been on the top shelf of my kitchen cabinet since before my daughters were born. In the corner, a paycheck, the first I ever earned in my own name, 1981. I had not opened this box in 43 years. That night, after the anniversary dinner, I did not cry that night. I did not pack a suitcase. I finished the meal. I washed my dishes by hand. Tonight, I am sitting with Carol, who is 67 years old, has been married for 40 years, and who came in this evening to tell me what she did the morning after her anniversary. The recipe box on the table between us tonight is hers. That is mine.
Yes.
How long have you had it? Since I was about 24. My mother had one like it. Wooden, with a little brass clasp on the front. I started putting things in mine right after I got married. Recipes from my mother-in-law. A few I cut out of newspapers. A few I wrote down myself. And then in December of 1981, when I stopped working at the end of the holiday season, I put my last paycheck in the corner of this box, and I did not think about it again until the night of my anniversary. You did not think about it for 43 years. Not once. Not really. I knew it was there, the way you know an old photograph is in a drawer. You do not look at it for years, and then one night you open the drawer for something else, and there it is, the anniversary dinner. You had guests. We had 2 people over, old friends, a couple we had known since before the children were born. My husband had set the table himself that evening, which he almost never does. He had folded the napkins carefully. I came downstairs and noticed that, and I thought, that is a kind gesture. 40 years is a long time to be married, and sometimes a man folds the napkins carefully, and you think, yes, he is making an effort. And then after the dessert, he reached down to the chair beside him and took out an envelope, and he slid it across the table to me. He said it was time to update a few things. I did not understand what I was looking at. There were several pages with language I had to read slowly. And I looked up at him and he said, you know how it is. You keep an old appliance past its time and eventually you just need to replace it with something newer. He asked which color I would like, a new one painted. Our 2 dinner guests were sitting right there at the table. We had known these people for 30 years. Nobody said anything, and I did not say anything either. I folded the envelope once, and I put it in the pocket of my sweater. I stood up, and I said, I think the chicken may have gotten cold. Let me just warm it up. I went to the kitchen. I stood at the counter. I took the envelope out, and I read it again. And then I put it back. And I went to the table, and I was pleasant for the rest of the evening. I have always been very good at being pleasant. You thanked the guests. I said goodnight, and I thanked them for coming. They had a long drive. My husband went to the living room to watch the news. And I cleared the table, same as any other evening after company. I cleared the table, and I went to the kitchen, and I washed the wedding china by hand, which is what I have always done after we use it. We only use it on anniversaries. I washed each piece and dried each piece and put each piece back in the cabinet. And the whole time I was thinking about that paycheck upstairs. What were you thinking? I was thinking, that paycheck has my name on it. That money is mine. I earned it. Nobody gave it to me. I earned it by standing on my feet for 8 weeks folding sweaters and being patient with people in a long holiday line. And then I thought, I want to be in the room when this is decided. Whatever this thing is that he has already started planning, I need to be part of it. I have a say in this. That was the first time I had ever said anything like that to myself about anything in 40 years of marriage. The first time. You did not say it out loud that night. Not out loud. Not yet. I finished the dishes, I put the china away, I went upstairs and I lay down in the dark and I waited for my husband to fall asleep. And when I was sure he was asleep, I got up and I went back to the kitchen and I reached up to the top shelf of the cabinet and I took down the recipe box. And I opened it. And the paycheck was exactly where I had put it in 1981. After 43 years, it was smaller than I remembered. The paper had gone soft at the fold. The ink was a little faded. But my name was on it, $248.16, my name. in my own handwriting. And I held it for a long time that night. And I thought, I need to take it somewhere. I do not know where yet, but I need to take it somewhere. The recipe box is on the studio table now, closed, between us. You have not opened it. I do not need to open it for anyone. But it has to be in the room. It has to be in the room now, wherever I go. When did the language start to change? That is a question I have been sitting with for a while now. When did it start? The honest answer is that it started so slowly, I do not know when it started. It was like the way a house settles. You do not hear each crack separately. You just notice one day that a door does not close the way it used to. Before the language changed, before the easier and the modernized and all of that. The paycheck in that box is from 1981. Tell me about that job. It was a department store. The second winter after my first daughter was born, my husband was working and the money was tighter that year than usual. And I went and spoke to the hiring manager and she took me on for the holiday season. I started right before Thanksgiving and worked through early December, and then I stopped when it got too close to when my second daughter was due. What was the work like? It was folding mostly, folding sweaters and straightening racks and helping people find their size, the fitting rooms in the afternoons. The lines on weekends were long and people were impatient because Christmas was coming and nothing was ever where they expected it to be. You had to stay even. You could not get rattled when someone was short with you. I was good at that. I had been good at that long before I worked at the store. You had been good at staying even. All my life. My mother was the same way. Very steady. She did not raise her voice. She handled things. I grew up watching that, and I thought that was how a person was supposed to be. You handled what came at you, and you kept the room running, and you did not make a production of it. The first paycheck. $248.16. That is what 8 weeks of holiday work paid in 1981. I cashed it at a branch on the street where the store was. I put the cash in my purse, and I put the pay stub in my coat pocket, and I rode the bus home. My first daughter was at a neighbor's. I made dinner that evening. I remember making a chicken. Nothing special. And at some point after dinner, I took the stub out of my coat pocket, and I put it in the recipe box. I did not know why I did that. It just seemed like the kind of thing to keep. And you never went back to work after that December. My second daughter was born in March, and then there was always something after that. The children needed something. The house needed something. My husband was working, and someone needed to be home, and that was me. And I did not mind it. I want to be clear about that. I liked being home. I liked being the one who knew where everything was. I liked cooking, and I liked managing the household. And I was very good at it. It was a life. It was a good life. I am not telling this story as a complaint about having been home. I am telling it because something changed much later that I did not see coming. And understanding what changed later requires understanding what was there before. The recipe box was always on the shelf. The paycheck was always in the corner, and I was always in the kitchen. Those three things were true for 40 years. The question is, what changed around them without my noticing? When you say you were the one who knew where everything was. Everything. Which daughter needed which medicine when she was sick? Which neighbor could not park on which day? Which bill needed to be paid before which other bill if the money was short that month? The schedule of the house lived in my head. My husband was good at his work. He worked hard. He brought home the income. I managed what the income paid for. That was the arrangement, and it worked for many years without needing to be discussed. When did the arrangement start to change shape? He started opening my mail. That was the first thing I remember noticing clearly. Not the bills, which had always been in his name anyway. My personal mail. A card from my sister, a catalog I subscribed to, a letter from my mother once when she was still living. He would open it and leave it on the counter for me, already opened. And he would say, I just wanted to save you the trouble, to save you the trouble, to save you the trouble. Yes, that was the sentence. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a kindness. The 20th time, I started to wonder whose trouble it was exactly, because I had never said the mail was a trouble to me. I had never asked him to open it. I had never said that catalog is too much for me to manage. Could you handle that? The mail had always been mine, and then one day it was less mine than it had been, and it had not happened in one large motion. It had happened in a series of small moments where he said he was saving me from something I had not said I needed saving from. And then it spread from the mail. He would make phone calls I had not asked him to make. He would schedule appointments without asking first. He would answer questions at the dinner table or in a waiting room that someone had directed at me, and he would answer before I could. All of it to save me the trouble. And I let most of it happen because it was easier than arguing over each small thing, and because some part of me began to wonder if maybe I was the trouble, if maybe I did need saving from things. You believed him for a while, for longer than I should have. He was not unkind about it. He was never cruel. He thought he was helping. The problem was that he was also making my life smaller, and he did not notice, and I did not say so, and the smaller it got, the harder it became to say so. How do you explain to someone that their kindness has become a removal? How do you say that without sounding ungrateful for the kindness? After the children came, I stopped earning. I did not stop working. I stopped being asked. You stopped being asked. When did you first notice that? That is what I have been trying to figure out for the past year. Because I remember a time when I was the one being consulted. I remember the first birthday party I organized for my older daughter. She was turning 3. I made the invitations by hand. I called the other mothers in the neighborhood. I made the cake, a white cake with lemon frosting, which was what she had pointed to in a magazine. I organized the games. I decorated the yard. My husband came home from work, and the house was ready, and the children were there, and he said, "This looks wonderful." And it was wonderful. And he had known none of it was happening until he walked in the door. He did not know it was happening. It was not that he did not care. It was that it had already been handled. The organizing happened in a space he was not in. That was the arrangement, and I had agreed to it, and it worked for everyone, and I did not feel badly about it at the time. What I notice now is that the organizing stayed in that space for 40 years. And over time, the space got smaller, and I did not notice the walls moving because they moved very slowly. The first Christmas in your house. The first Christmas in our house was the year I understood that I was the one who made Christmas. My husband gave me a budget and said, "Whatever you need for the holiday, use this." And I planned the week. I bought the food and the gifts. I made my mother's banana bread and my grandmother's cookie recipe. I decorated the house. I organized which family came on which day and what we were eating and where people were sleeping if they were staying over. And he wrote the cheeks when I brought him the bills, and he greeted people at the door when they arrived. And he sat at the head of the table and carved the turkey, and everyone had a wonderful time. And my name was not on any of the cheeks. And nobody needed to notice that. The whole week had lived in my head for the month before it happened, because it all worked. It worked every year. The birthday parties worked. The Christmases worked. The Thanksgivings and the summer plans and the school schedules and the dentist appointments and the prescription pickups and the contractor coordination and the holiday cards and the neighbor gifts, all of it worked every year for 40 years. The fact that it worked was the reason nobody asked about it. Why would you ask about something that was already working? Why would you bring in a second person to manage something that the first person had always managed? The paycheck in that corner of the box, you mentioned it has been there since before the children came. Did your mother's recipes end up in there too? A few cards, her banana bread, a potato salad she made every Easter, a Christmas cookie recipe that is more difficult than it looks. I have never been able to make them the way she made them. I think there is a step she did not write down because she did not need to. She had made those cookies 500 times, and she knew what she was doing, and the card was for other people. For me, eventually, I am still learning what is on the card and what is not on the card. She kept things her own way. She was a practical woman. She did not overcomplicate. I learned most of what I know about cooking from watching her. And I learned from watching her how to keep a house running quietly. She did not need praise for it. She just did it. That was the model I had. You do the work, and the work is its own reason. The doctor's office, that was a few years ago. A routine checkup. One of my daughters had come with me, which I appreciated. She is a thoughtful daughter. She had taken the morning off work. And when the doctor came in, he looked at my daughter first. He said, "And how has she been doing?" Not at me, at my daughter. My daughter was starting to answer, and I said, "I can answer that. I can answer for myself. I am sitting right here." The doctor looked a little surprised, like that was not the usual thing to say in response. "What did your daughter do?" She looked at her hands. I think she was embarrassed for a moment, not at me, just unsure of what to do. She had not started the arrangement. The doctor had established it in the first 3 seconds of the appointment, and she had been about to go along with it, the way you go along with how things are arranged in waiting rooms and offices. Most people go along. I had been going along for 40 years. That afternoon, for that one small moment, I did not. "I am sitting right here," I said it, and then I answered the doctor's questions, and the appointment continued normally. My daughter and I went and had coffee afterward. She asked if I was all right. I said I was fine, and I was. But I kept thinking about it. I kept thinking, that is the first time I have said those words in a very long time. I am present. I have something to say about my own situation. When did I stop being the person who was looked at when someone wanted to know how she was doing? I had not noticed I had stopped being asked. I had not noticed because it happened so gradually and so quietly that each individual step looked like nothing. But that afternoon at the doctor's office, I looked back and I could see the whole staircase. And I thought, when did that start? When did I become the person who is spoken about while she is sitting in the room? You told me a moment ago that you stopped being asked, and in the next moment, your husband sold your mother's car. And then he sold my mother's car. My mother's car was a 1989 Buick LeSabre, white with a gray interior. She had driven it since before I can remember clearly. After she passed, the car was in our garage. I was not ready to sell it. There is no good time to be ready to sell your mother's car. You are ready when you are ready, and I was not ready. How long had it been there? Almost 2 years, maybe a little longer. I had driven it a few times. Not regularly. I just wanted it to be there for a while longer. The smell of a car is a specific thing. My mother's car smelled like her. Her handbag, a particular hand lotion she used. I would sit in the driver's seat sometimes and just be there for a few minutes, not going anywhere. He sold it. He sold it to a man whose son needed a first car. He told me after the fact. He said the man had made an offer and it was reasonable, and he had figured I was not using it anyway, so he said it as though that was a reasonable sentence. I was not using it anyway, so he did not come to me first. He did not say, "This man is interested in the car. What would you like to do?" He made the decision, and then he told me about it. "What did you say?" I said, "All right." I said it, and then I went to the kitchen and I started dinner. Because what was there to say after the fact? The car was gone. The man's son had a first car. I stood at the stove and I thought, that car was mine to decide about. My mother had driven it for 20 years. It was not his car. And the car it was a 1989 Buick. It was not the car, it was that he did not ask. He did not ask. He did not ask because it had not occurred to him that he needed to. I had not objected. I had not put a note on it. I had not said, "Do not sell the car." So to him, that meant I had not objected. But I had not objected because I had not been asked. The space between not objecting and consenting is wider than most people think. I had been living in that space for a long time without knowing it had a name. The last time you had driven it, the week before, I had gone to pick up something from a neighbor 2 streets over, and I had taken the Buick instead of my own car for no particular reason. The seats were the way they always were, the same angle, the same slight creak in the driver's side when you settled your weight. I have my mother's driving habits too. She always adjusted the mirror before she started the car. I do that in every car I have ever driven. I adjusted the mirror in the Buick that day, and I thought, she adjusted this same mirror. And then I drove to the neighbors and came back and thought nothing more of it. That was the last time I sat in it. I came back from the grocery store, and the garage had a space in it where the car had been. My husband said the man had come that morning while I was out. He said the man had been pleased with the car, that his son was happy to have it. I said, that is good. And I put the groceries away, and I started making dinner. But I noticed the space in the garage for a long time after that, months. Every time I pulled in, I would see the space, and my eye would go to it the way your eye goes to a gap in a fence. The recipe box, you mentioned your mother's banana bread. Her handwriting is in there.
A few cards in her writing, yes. The banana bread, the potato salad.
I can see the way she formed her letters when I opened the box. She had very upright handwriting, very careful. She took her time with each letter. Her handwriting on those recipe cards. My handwriting on the paycheck in the corner. Both in the same box. I used to try to match her hand when I wrote letters to her. I have not written a proper letter by hand in years. She would have had something to say about the Buick. She would have had something sharp to say, yes. She was not a woman who said nothing when something needed saying. That was a quality I watched in her and did not always inherit fully. The holidays, the daughters, that was a year or so after the car, maybe 2 years. One of my daughters called her father first to ask about Christmas that year. She wanted to know if we were doing the holiday at our house or at her sister's house. She called him because, she said later, he was easier to reach. He answered the phone more reliably. I had been the one who planned Christmas for 40 years. I had been the one who knew what everyone needed and when. And that year, she called him first. What did he tell her? He told her to talk to him about the holidays because I get tired. That is what he told her. She mentioned it to me, almost by accident a few weeks later, and then she looked sorry she had said it. And I said, I get tired. And she said, well, you know, with all the cooking and everything. And I said, I have been doing the cooking and everything for 40 years, and I have never once said I was tired. I have never said, I cannot do Christmas this year. I have never handed it off to anyone. She gets tired. That is what he told them. And my daughters, who are good daughters and who love me, began routing the holiday questions through their father because he had said I got tired and they did not want to burden me. They were protecting me. That is how they understood what they were doing. They were following a direction that had been laid down for them quietly by someone they trusted. And I had not been in the room when that direction was given. And what was happening in those same years was the language about the house. The kitchen was outdated. The car before the Buick was outdated. I just wanted it to be there for a while longer. The smell of a car is a specific thing. My mother's car smelled like her handbag. The appliances were outdated. Every few months, something new appeared on the list. Modernized, updated, freshened. My husband used those words often, as though the house and everything in it was a fleet of equipment that required regular cycling out. Everything was on the list. Everything was on the list, eventually. I just did not know I was on it until the night he handed me the papers. You said, and then they brought you the kitchen plans, and then they brought me the kitchen plans. The kitchen plans were pages long. He had a contractor he had already been speaking to. There were 3 different countertop options and 2 different stove models, and a timeline for when the work would begin. He had made 3 calls to the contractor before he sat down at the kitchen table with me and spread the papers out. He said, I just wanted to have something concrete to show you. I wanted to take the confusion out of it for you. He had already made the calls, 3 of them. He had gotten the estimate. He was handling the early stages so that I would not have to bother with the confusing part. As though choosing what goes in your own kitchen is too confusing to be left to the person who has cooked in it for 30 years. He was saving you the trouble. He was saving me the trouble of choosing what went into my own kitchen. I had cooked on that stove for 30 years. I knew every burner on it. I knew which one ran a little hot and which one you had to coax and which one was perfect for a slow simmer all day. I knew that stove the way I knew the sound of my daughter's footsteps in the hall. And he had already chosen the replacement. And what made it hard to push back on was that the kitchen was nice when they finished. The countertops were smooth and easy to clean. The new stove was a good stove. I learned it. I have learned every kitchen I have ever worked in, and I learned this one. But while I was at my sister's for a weekend, he had organized the new cabinets. He said it would be a nice surprise to come home and have it all organized already. And I spent the next several weeks reaching for a drawer that was no longer where I expected it to be. And the dinner party. A few months later, we had 4 people at the table. Someone asked whether there was dessert, and my husband said, "She will bring out the dessert when it's time." I was sitting right there at the same table. He said S-H-E, as though I were in another room entirely. And I got up and I brought out the dessert because it was the easiest thing to do. And I sat back down and I continued the dinner. How many times had he done that? I do not know. I had not kept count. That evening was the first time I heard it clearly. But he had been saying she for a while, I think. She would prefer this. She does not like that. She needs things arranged a certain way. He had been building a description of me in conversations I was not part of, and what I had been present for I had let pass. That evening it sat differently. I heard the she and I thought, I am sitting at this same table. May I ask you about the anniversary?
You may ask.
The dinner, the papers. Walk me through what you remember. We had set the table that afternoon together, he and I. He had put out the good glasses, which I noticed. Our 2 guests arrived, 30 years of friendship between the 4 of us. The dinner was a roast chicken with herbs that I had prepped that morning, olive bread I had baked, a pie I had made the day before. It was a good dinner, a long dinner to prepare, and a good one to sit down to. After the dessert plates were cleared, he reached to the chair beside him and took out an envelope. He slid it across to me. He said, "It is time we updated a few things. I did not understand what I was reading. There were several pages. There was language about adjustments, about what he called the future terms of our household arrangements." I read the first page twice, and I looked up at him. And he said, "You know how these things go. An old appliance, you keep it past its time, and eventually it just has to go." He said, "Which color would you like? A new one painted." In front of the 2 people we had known for 30 years, who were looking at their dessert plates, I said, "I think the chicken may have gotten cold." I stood up and I went to the kitchen. I put the envelope in my sweater pocket. I stood at the counter for a moment. I took the envelope out and I read the top page one more time. And then I put it back in my pocket. And I went to the table and I sat down and I finished the meal. You finished the meal. I finished the meal. The guests stayed another hour. We had coffee. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, a trip someone was planning, something one of the grandchildren had said. And I was there. I was present. I said the right things at the right moments. When they left, I said goodnight, and I thanked them for coming. My husband went to the living room. And I cleared the table, and I went to the kitchen. I washed the wedding china by hand, every piece. I did not cry, I did not throw anything, I did not slam a single cabinet door. I washed each plate and dried each plate and put each plate back in the cabinet. And at the end of it, I was standing at the kitchen sink with the dish towel in my hands, and the kitchen was quiet, and I said, "I would like to be in the room when this is decided." Out loud that time, just to myself, in the dark kitchen, to the dish towel. That was the second time I had said it. And then I stood there another moment and I said it again because I needed to hear what it sounded like in my own voice. And then I thought, that paycheck is up on the shelf. I have not opened that box in 43 years. And that night I stood at the sink for a long time thinking about it. You had been keeping it on that shelf for 40 years. The box had been there my whole time in that house. I have moved through that kitchen 10,000 times, and the box was always on the top shelf. I reached past it for other things. I dusted around it. I knew it was there, but I had not thought about the paycheck specifically in years. Maybe not since I put it there. And standing at the sink with the dish towel in my hands and the kitchen quiet around me and my husband asleep upstairs, I thought, that paycheck has my name on it. That is money I earned. Before the children, before this house, before the joint account, and the holiday planning and the recipe collection and everything that came after. That paycheck was mine before any of it. And it was still there. It had been waiting up on that shelf the whole time. What did you do with the dish towel? I folded it the way I always fold it, over the handle of the oven door. I turned off the kitchen light. I stood in the doorway for a moment, and then I went upstairs. You did not open the box that night. I put my hand on the cabinet door. I thought about it. But I did not open it that night. I went to bed. And in the morning, I did. The morning after the anniversary. You woke up and the papers were still there. He had left them on the kitchen counter, not in the envelope, spread flat on the counter where I could not miss them when I came down to make coffee. I do not know if he left them there on purpose or if he had just set them down the night before and not picked them up. I came downstairs and the papers were there and the coffee was not made yet, and I stood at the edge of the kitchen for a moment before I went in. You stood at the edge. I do not usually pause at the doorway of my own kitchen. I have been walking into that kitchen for 40 years without stopping to think about it. But that morning I stood at the doorway for a moment and I looked at the counter and the papers spread flat on it. And then I went in, I made the coffee. I looked at the papers while the coffee was making. I did not pick them up. I did not read them again. I just looked at them on the counter. And then I went to the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet. The shelf where the recipe box lives has always lived since the first year we were in this house. I reached up and I took it down. I brought it to the kitchen table and I sat down and I opened it. I went to the corner and I took out the paycheck. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was a little fragile at the fold after 43 years. I smoothed it flat on the kitchen table with my palm. And you read it again. I read it again in the morning light. $248.16, payable to Carol. My name. My handwriting in the endorsement on the back, the ink faded but still legible. My signature. I sat with it on the kitchen table for a few minutes. I had not looked at my own handwriting from 4 to 3 years ago in a very long time. It was the same handwriting. Maybe a little more careful back then, a little more deliberate with each letter. But the same hand that folds sweaters and writes grocery lists and signs birthday cards and now sits in this studio. What did you do with it? I picked it up from the table and I carried it to the kitchen counter. The anniversary papers were still spread out there where he had left them the night before. I placed the paycheck on top of the papers, not to the side, not on the counter beside them. On top of them, I smoothed it down with my hand. I looked at it there for a moment. She did not say a word. She placed it on top. I did not say anything because there was no one there. My husband was still asleep. The house was quiet. It was early enough that the street outside was still. Just the kitchen and the papers and the paycheck on top of the papers, and the coffee getting cold on the counter. I stood there for a moment, and then I walked out of the kitchen. I left the recipe box open on the table. I left the paycheck where I had put it. You walked out. I went to the living room. I sat in the chair by the window, the one I sit in most mornings. I sat there for a long time. I did not read anything. I did not turn the television on. I just sat there and looked at the yard, the maple tree, the light coming through the new leaves. And I thought, I do not know yet exactly what I am going to do. But I know I have to take this somewhere outside this house, somewhere that is mine in a way that is also written down. Your husband came downstairs eventually. He came in and made his coffee, and he did not mention the recipe box on the table. He may not have noticed it, or he may have noticed and decided not to say anything. I was in the living room, and he stayed in the kitchen for a while, and then he came to the doorway, and he said, "Do you want some toast?" That is what he said. "Do you want some toast?" And I said, "Not yet, thank you." And he nodded and went back to the kitchen. We have been married 40 years, and there are mornings in a long marriage where you do not need more words than that. Except that morning, the words landed differently than they usually did. because the paycheck was on the kitchen counter and the recipe box was open on the table. And I had decided something in the night that he did not know yet. He did not know yet. He had not seen the paycheck on top of his papers. I do not know whether he had noticed the papers had been moved at all. I sat in the living room until I heard him go upstairs to get dressed. And then I went back to the kitchen. Had you ever had an account in just your name? We had always had a joint account. We combined everything when we got married, and I had never thought to open anything separate. Everything I needed was in the joint account. It had not been a problem until I thought about what having a problem with it might look like. And you sat in the chair and you thought about the bank. I thought about the bank branch I had used in 1981, the one near where the department store used to be. I did not know if that branch was still there or if it mattered. But I kept thinking about walking into a bank and giving them a name and leaving with something that had my name on it, something that was mine in a way that required a signature, my signature, not a joint signature. Did you know that morning you were going the next day? Not quite. I thought I could go. And the thinking about it was the closest thing to certainty I had. I went back to the kitchen eventually. I picked up my coffee cup and rinsed it at the sink. The paycheck was still on top of the anniversary papers where I had left it. I looked at it there for a moment, and then I closed the recipe box and I put it under my arm and I went upstairs. I thought, tomorrow I will take it somewhere. I did not know yet what I was going to do with it. I knew I had to take it somewhere. The next morning I got up early, before my husband was awake. I made coffee. I got dressed. I put the paycheck in my purse. I picked up the recipe box from where I had left it the day before, and I carried it out to the car, and I put it on the passenger seat. I do not know why I put the box in the car. I just did not want to leave it in the house while I was gone. The recipe box on the passenger seat. It sat there on the way to the bank. I had not told my husband where I was going. I had not told anyone. I had not called ahead. I simply went. You drove to the bank. It is a 20-minute drive past familiar things. The pharmacy I use. The park where I took my daughters when they were small. The dry cleaner I have been going to for years. I was not in a hurry. I parked and sat in the car for a moment before I went in. What were you thinking? I was thinking about whether I would need to produce identification. I was thinking I should have looked up the hours before I left. I was not thinking about my husband. I was not thinking about the papers in the hallway drawer. I was just thinking about what I would need to have ready when I got to the counter. That was all I was thinking about. Which bank? The branch was fine. I parked and I went in and I stood in the line and I waited my turn, same as any other errand. And when it was your turn, I went to the counter and I said, I would like to open an account, in my name only. The teller was a woman about my younger daughter's age. She was efficient and pleasant, and she did not look at me strangely. She pulled up the paperwork on her screen, and she said, and what name would you like on the account? I gave her my name, and my full legal name. The same name that is on the pay-to line of the 1981 paycheck. I had not used my full legal name much in recent years. But I said my full name, and she typed it in, and she did not ask any questions about it. You gave her the name on the paycheck. I had not planned to think of it that way. It just came out that way in my head while I was saying it. This is the name that earned that money in 1981. This is the name that is still mine. I said it, and she typed it, and we moved on. The account details. She asked if I was sure about that, and I said yes. I had my Social Security payment. I had a small pension payment that was partly in my name from my husband's old employer. She helped me redirect both of those to the new account. She said, and you would like single signature authority on this account, is that correct? I said yes, single signer. And the signature card. She gave me a form to sign. She slid it across the counter and gave me a pen. And I signed it with the same signature that is on the endorsement line on the back of the 1981 paycheck. A little slower now, a little more deliberate, but the same letters, the same name, the same hand. And they gave you a passbook, a small blue passbook, my name on the front, the account number, a starting balance of the minimum amount required to open it. She slid it across the counter to me, and I picked it up and I put it in my purse. And I said, "Thank you." And I walked out. What did that walkout feel like? It felt very ordinary. That is what I keep coming back to. It felt like dropping off a prescription or picking up dry cleaning. A perfectly ordinary errand on an ordinary morning. I got back in the car. The recipe box was still on the passenger seat where I had left it. I opened the lid. I took the passbook out of my purse. I put it in the corner of the recipe box, next to the paycheck, both of them in the same corner. Both of them with your name, both of them with my name, yes. And I thought, there are two things in this box now, and they both belong to me. And then I drove home. Your husband was awake when you got home. He was in the kitchen having his coffee. He asked where I had been. I said I had run an errand. He said, "Anything important?" I said, "No, nothing important." I put my purse down. I put the recipe box on the counter. I made a second cup of coffee, and I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the yard for a minute. He poured the second cup for you. He did, yes. He saw my cup was low and he filled it. He has done that after errands for as long as I can remember. He sees the cup and he fills it. There was a point in the past year when I would have held that up as an example of the pattern. The not asking, the presuming to know. But that morning I thought, he was right about the coffee. I did want it. That particular small reading of me was accurate. Not every act of knowing a person is an erasure. Some of it is just 40 years of paying attention. I have to keep the two things separate. Some of it was actual care. Some of it was not. I am still working out which was which. The papers were still on the counter. I moved them to the drawer in the hallway table. They had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 2 days. They belonged to him. They had always been his papers in some way, even when he was handing them to me. I put them in the drawer, and I closed it, and I did not think about them again that day. After the bank, I felt the same. The same person, the same kitchen, the same house. I had not solved anything. I had not had the conversations I needed to have. I had not finished anything. But I had started something small and specific and entirely mine. And I thought, now I need to bring the right people into a room. I need to sit at a table with my husband and my daughters, and I need to be the one who called the meeting. I have been attending other people's meetings about my life for a long time. I wanted to call one myself. You called the meeting. I had told them to come at 2. My older daughter arrived a few minutes early. She came in and helped me put the water pitcher on the table and set out the glasses. My younger daughter arrived just before 2. My husband was already in the dining room at his usual place at the head of the table, and I had set the recipe box on the table in front of where I was going to sit. You had set it there before anyone arrived. I had put it on the table that morning when I set the room up, and I had left it there. It was just there when everyone came in. My older daughter walked into the dining room, and she saw it, and she paused. She asked what it was. I said it was my recipe box. She had not seen it out on the dining room table before. You do not usually bring a recipe box to a family meeting. She looked at it for a moment, and then she looked at me, and she did not ask anything more. The family settled in. We sat down. My husband poured the water. My younger daughter asked if she should start coffee. I said not yet. And we sat there with the recipe box on the table between us. My older daughter was looking at the box. My younger daughter was looking at me. My husband was looking at the glass he had just filled. And then you opened the box. I had not opened it. The lid was closed. But when I sat down, I reached over and I opened it. I did not make a presentation of it. I just opened the lid and set it to the side. The paycheck was there in the corner, and the bank passbook was beside it. My older daughter leaned forward slightly. She is the one who notices things. She said, "Is that a check? Is that an old check?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Whose name is on it?" I said, "Mine." She saw your name. She looked at the pay-to line and she read my name, and she looked at the passbook next to it. She looked at me. She said, "Mom." Just that, just the word. The way she said it told me she understood something had changed. I do not know how much she understood in that moment, but she understood something was different from how it had been. And your husband, he had looked at the box after she spoke. He was looking at it when I began to talk. I had been thinking about it, and none of them felt right when I rehearsed them. When I sat down at that table with my husband and my daughters and the recipe box open between us, what came out was not anything I had written. What came out? Whatever decisions are being made about my life, I want to be at that table when they are made. My husband looked at the recipe box and did not say anything for a long time. And I sat there. My older daughter put her hand flat on the table. My younger daughter went very still, and I let the silence be what it was. I had spent 40 years filling silences that did not need to be filled. That one I left alone. And then my older daughter said, "That seems right." She said, "That seems like the right thing." My younger daughter said, "We should have been asking you first about things." She said she was sorry. And my husband looked up from the recipe box. He said, "I did not think you wanted to be bothered with these things." He said it with no anger and no cruelty. He said it the way he had said everything for 40 years. He believed he had been doing me a favor. He genuinely believed that. He believed it. He believed it the whole time. That is the part that is hardest to explain to people when I try to talk about this. He is not a bad man. He has not been cruel. He loves me in the way he knows how to love, which is to handle things so that they do not require effort from me. He has been doing this for a very long time, and he thought it was a kindness, and I had not told him otherwise, and so it continued. The problem is that deciding what someone needs without asking them is not the same as loving them. It is something else. You can mean it as love, and still it is something else. We sat there for a while after that. My daughters asked questions. Careful questions, not accusatory. They wanted to understand what we were going to do now and what I needed. I said I was not certain yet of all the specifics, but that I was going to be in the room when we decided. My husband said, "All right." He said it the way a man says something when the room has just shifted and he is still finding where everything landed. And when the daughters left, my older daughter hugged me at the door for a long time. My younger daughter said, "Call me this week." Not the way you say it as a parting, and I watched both of them pull out of the driveway. And then I went back to the dining room and I picked up the recipe box from the table. I closed the lid, I held it for a moment, and then I carried it to the kitchen and set it on the counter while I started dinner. You were at the same table as the anniversary dinner, the same dining room, the same chairs, the same table where he had slid the envelope across to me 2 weeks before. The same room where he had said she will bring out the dessert when it's time, and I had gotten up and brought out the dessert. But the arrangement of who was speaking and who was being listened to had changed. I had said my sentence. My daughters had heard it. My husband had heard it. The room had been quiet for a long time in a different way than it had ever been quiet before. From the beginning of tonight, I have been holding a question. May I ask it now? Yes. When you placed that paycheck on top of those anniversary papers, alone in your kitchen in the early morning, what did you know that you had not known the night before? I knew that the paycheck was mine and had always been mine, that the recipe box was mine and had always been mine, that my name was on both of them and had always been my name. I had known all of that before in a general way, but that morning I knew it. The way you know something when you hold it in your hands and it does not change. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The room had stopped. We are back in the studio. The recipe box is on the table between us and it is open. A minute ago, I watched you reach in and take the paycheck out and fold it back. I fold it the same way each time, along the same crease it has always had. The paper knows where to go. You have been doing that without knowing you were doing it. I have been doing it since 1981. I open the box, I see the paycheck in the corner. Sometimes I take it out and fold it back and put it away again. I did not know I had done it that many times. I just knew where it was. My hands knew where it was when I reached in without looking. And the passbook is beside it now. It fits in the corner, both of them together. The passbook is new and the paycheck is old, and they are about the same size. And they sit side by side in the corner of the box where I have been keeping things for 40 years. The anniversary papers. Those are in his drawer in the hallway table. They belong to him. I do not need them. Whatever they say, whatever arrangement he had in mind, that is between him and his accountant. It is not in my recipe box. Tell me about the morning after the family meeting. I made coffee. We were both in the kitchen at the same time, my husband and I, the way we often are. We did not say much. There are mornings in a 40-year marriage where the silence is full of what was said the day before, and you are both still sitting with it, and the coffee is enough company for a while. He went to his chair in the living room. I stood at the kitchen window. What were you thinking? I was thinking about the recipe box on the shelf, the passbook and the paycheck together in the corner. And I was thinking none of it was valuable in any financial sense. It was just mine. The whole box was just mine. The shelf was mine. The kitchen was mine. I built this kitchen. I cooked in it and cleaned it and managed it and organized it and spent more hours in it than in any other room in this house for 40 years. And I had been treating it as though I needed permission to stand in it on my own terms. You had been keeping it. I had not been hiding the paycheck. I want to say that clearly. I was not hiding it because I was ashamed of it or because it was a secret from anyone. I had been keeping it because it was mine and because the recipe box was where I kept things that were mine. And when you keep something for 4 to 3 years without knowing entirely why, it means something, even if you cannot name the meaning. Some part of me knew it mattered. I just did not have a reason to need it until I needed it. What is different now in the mornings? He checks with me first more often than he used to. He is not always good at it. 40 years of a habit is a long time, and it does not change all at once. But he checks more often. And when he does not check, I say something. That is the part that has changed the most. I say something now. I say, I would like to have been asked about that. And sometimes it is uncomfortable and sometimes it is not, and we go on. Give me an example from the past month. He made a dinner reservation without asking. We have gone to the same restaurant on our birthdays for years. He called and made the reservation and told me that evening. I said, I would have liked to have been asked first. You always like that restaurant. I said, I do. I still would have liked to have been asked. He was quiet for a moment and said, all right, next time I will ask. And the following week he did. He asked before he made any plans. That is the change. You say something. He used to say the kitchen was tired. The stove was tired. The appliances were tired. Everything in the house got old and needed to be freshened and updated and modernized. And I was on that list, and I did not know it for a long time. Something I keep coming back to. I was the only one in this house who never got to be tired out loud. Every other thing was allowed to show its age and need attention. But I had arranged myself for 40 years to never need anything, and the arranging became the truth, and the truth became the expectation, and the expectation became invisible. And I had agreed that I was the only one in this house who never got to be tired out loud. The kitchen cabinets got tired, the car got old, the whole inventory of the house was allowed to show its age and need attention. And I cooked in the tired kitchen and managed with the old fixtures and kept the household running quietly. And it did not occur to anyone to ask whether Carol needed anything. I had been managing the house. I had become part of the house. And the house was on the list to be updated. There are women watching tonight who have something on a top shelf they have not opened in a long time. I think so too. I hope so. I kept this paycheck for FO 43 years without being able to say why. And no, I can tell you WI. I kept it because it had my name on it, because I earned it, because something in me, even when I was 24 years old and putting a pay stub in the corner of a wooden box, understood that there would come a day when I would need to be reminded that I had earned something that belonged only to me. I did not know when that day would come, but I kept the paycheck because the day was coming. Tomorrow morning, the kitchen will be the kitchen again. Tomorrow morning, the kitchen will be the kitchen. I will still be in it. I will be in it on purpose. The morning after the family meeting, I got up early, before my husband was awake. I came down to the kitchen and I stood at the window before I made the coffee. The yard was still. There is a maple tree in the yard that has been there since before we bought the house. I have watched it from that window in every season for 40 years. That morning, the light was coming through the new leaves the way it does in late spring, that particular pale green that only lasts a few weeks before it deepens into summer. I stood there and I watched the light through the leaves, and I thought, I have been standing at this window for 40 years. And it is still a good window. I did not need to be on anyone's list of things to be updated for it to be a good window. It has always been a good window. What did you make for breakfast? Scrambled eggs. I had eggs and some bread left from the day before. I made them the way I have made them for 40 years. The same pan. Butter in the pan, heat medium, not high, because high heat makes them tough. I learned that from my mother. She made eggs the same way. I was standing at the stove the morning after the most significant conversation I had had in 40 years of marriage, and the eggs were the eggs. That is something I keep coming back to. The kitchen smelled like toast and butter and early morning. The light was the same light it always is at that hour. I was standing in the same spot at the same stove with the same pan, and I was making breakfast the way I have always made breakfast. And it felt different. It felt exactly the same and completely different at once. The pan was the same. My hand on the spatula was the same. The sound of eggs and butter is the same sound it has always been. What was different was the reason I was standing there. I was standing in my kitchen because it was mine, and I had chosen to be in it. Not because it was the thing I had always done and would continue to do without anyone asking. I was there because I wanted to be there. That is a small thing. It is also the whole thing. The recipe box is back on the shelf. I put it back that morning. The passbook is inside it, in the corner next to the paycheck, where the paycheck has been since 1981. The anniversary papers are in his drawer in the hall. They are still there. We have not finished all of the conversations we are going to need to have. I do not know how all of them will go. There are things that will need to be discussed that I am not looking forward to discussing. And there are things that will probably be fine, and I will not have known to worry about them. I do not have certainty about how all of this ends. Is there anything new in the recipe box now? Anything added since the family meeting? There is a card my older daughter left for me a few days after. She had written on the outside of the envelope, "I should have called you first." Just that, on the outside. Inside, she wrote a few lines. Nothing long. She said she had been thinking about it, and she was sorry that she had routed things through her father, and she would not do that going forward. She said, "You have always been the one who knew what was needed." I put the card in the recipe box. In the corner, with the paycheck and the passbook, it is the first new thing I have put in that box in a long time. The box is getting full. It is still mostly empty. A few recipe cards, a birthday card from my mother that has been in there for years, one old paycheck, one bank passbook, one card from my daughter. 40 years and the box is still mostly empty. I think that is right. You do not fill a box like that with everything. You put in what matters, what you need to be able to reach on a certain kind of night. And the bank account, it is a small account. The balance is not large. My Social Security payment comes in now and the pension amount. It is not a fortune, but it is mine. I know the account number. I have signed the card. My name is on the passbook in my own handwriting. That means something to me. I cannot fully explain to you what it means, but it means something that I intend to keep meaning. 40 years in that kitchen. 40 years. I know every drawer. The sound the refrigerator makes when it is working hard, I would recognize anywhere. I know where the afternoon light comes in. I have stood at that sink long enough to know how the room smells when bread is in the oven, and how it smells when it is empty and late and the house is quiet. I have cooked thousands of meals in that kitchen. I have stood at that sink more times than I could possibly count. It has always been my kitchen. I had just stopped moving through it as though it was. And now I move through it as though it is. Because it is. She came back into her own kitchen. I did not leave the house. I did not leave the marriage. I came back into the room. That is what I did. I came back into the room that was always mine. The room she came back into was always hers.